about to get started again. I am so happy with what we got to hear from our first two speakers this morning. And again, thank you again for staying with us for a part of the afternoon as well. So our next two speakers are going to be wonderful. The first one I'm going to introduce here is Joy Raintree. She is the park manager at Redcliffe Plantation, and historic site, right? And she has been with them for 15 years. She has a master's in public history and then a bachelor's of science in anthropology as well. So she's a wonderful resource that's not too far away from us. And so, I didn't even have to look at my phone to remember all that. So I'm really excited, and because I know y'all are going to be a food coma if we keep you sitting here for too long, I know she brought props for her. You're going to have to move around a little bit, so get ready, all right? So thank you, Joy.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Good afternoon. I was going to say good morning. Morning's flown by for me. I want to introduce myself as a park ranger, first and foremost. So I wear a Mickey hat and the hat badge and all that good stuff. And yeah, I knew I was coming after lunch, and I have been speaking to people for 15 years plus, so I knew that I had to come with something fun. So, we're going to be talking about a very serious subject, but we are going to be having fun. And I heard in the last session that you guys had to think about what it would be like to be a college intern or a museum intern, kind of looking into a collection. Well, now you get to be third graders. And I think it was you that said that it was like trying to get the class back settled down, right? Okay, well that's appropriate because you guys
herding cats.
Yeah, so you guys are going to be third graders today. So I hope you have some fun with that. Yeah. I'm going to. I am. I'm going to.
You're really shaking.
Yeah, no, I'm going to. I promise. Because we see about 2,000 third graders a year. We do curriculum-based programs for them, and you guys are going to do that program today. And I'm going to be doing very site-specific for Redcliffe Plantation, which I'll explain a little bit about Redcliffe from an adult perspective first. But they come to Redcliffe to do activities, to do a field trip. They're there for 2.5, 3 hours with one class. One ranger is with one class. And so the first thing that I do with them when they get off the bus is to explain that they're here, they hear the other park ranger do the introduction, that they're here to have fun, they're going to do some crafts, they're going to play some games. And then my class, and I say, she didn't say anything about doing work. And they're like looking at me, you're going to be working today, and you're going to be doing my job. And that's what you guys are going to be doing. And you guys do that job. Every time you volunteer, every time you come to work here at Historic Columbia, you're doing the same job that I'm doing. So I tell them they're not going to get to be a park ranger, right? So I've got my goofy little hat and my badge, and that's one of my jobs. One of my jobs is to be a park ranger. But my favorite job is the job that you guys are going to get to do today, and that's to be historians. So I think it's really important for the third graders that we see, not only that they're getting the content of the plantation life, but they're understanding who is doing that research and how are they doing that research. So they use buildings, they use photographs, they use activities, they use documents, and all of those things help to build this definition of who a historian is and what a historian does. And third graders are pretty savvy. They know that historians study history. You say, well, what is history? History is something big that happened in the past. And I always stop them, like, does it have to be a big event like the Civil War? Because that's the time period we'll be talking about with them. Or can it be any activity like washing clothes, building a house? And they're like, oh, no, yeah, it doesn't have to be a big activity. It doesn't have to be a big event. Well, it doesn't have to be a famous person. Do we have to be talking about Abraham Lincoln? Or can we be talking about a person who did that work on the property? Is that also part of history? And they're like, yeah. So okay, well, we're going to be thinking about those people who did average, everyday things on a plantation. And we study the whole plantation system. And I just have to go ahead and confess, we are definitely spoiled at Redcliffe Plantation. It is an 1859 plantation site. That's when the main house was built. But we have existing slave quarters that we can go into. James Henry Hammond was the man that owned that plantation, along with 3 other plantations in Aiken County, about 14,000 acres. And this man wrote daily journals. He wrote a plantation manual of how he wanted his overseers to manage his properties. He kept birth and death records on each of his plantations. He wrote letters. He kept business papers. So we have just this plethora of information that we can use from and draw from. And we're going to be using those things as we go through the program today. And hopefully you guys can see a similarity in some of the documents that you have access to, and maybe think about ways that you can use those documents that you haven't before, or use those ideas. So are you guys ready to be third graders? No, you're not! Where is Redcliffe? Redcliffe is in Aiken County. The physical address is Beach Island, South Carolina, yeah. So we're actually closer to Augusta, Georgia than we are to Aiken, South Carolina. We are about 5 miles from the Savannah River. Our site that we operate is a 369-acre site that has the mansion, a 13,000 square feet mansion. It has over 4,000 artifacts that belong to the family that lives there. So things that predate the house, things that they were collecting much, much earlier, but things that also go up to 1975 because there were 4 generations of the family that lived there. So obviously, when we're doing this program for the kids, we're focusing in on their 3rd grade standards, which is this antebellum time period. So we skip all, everything else, and as they're walking through the house, they're like, but there's electricity there, there's the toilet there. Well, yeah, this house was lived in. And we also do one other thing, and I don't know how many students you guys see or anything like that, and I don't know what the cost for the program or anything, but just something that's helped us. Is a lot of those kids that we see, their families have never been to Redcliffe before. And we want them to come back with their families. And we don't want that to be cost prohibitive. So one of the things we give the kids, each child that comes out to see us on a field trip gets a pass to bring their whole family back. And, we tell them this is a free pass. And they say, did I say free? Nothing is free. So I give them also life lessons. Nothing is free. So if you come back with the pass, that tells us that you've been here before and that you know things. You are a historian, and you are going to help us to tell the story of the people that lived here. So get them actively engaged, and I can't even tell you how many passes we've had turned back in. I mean, we see so many repeat visits from that. And, will those people come back and spend money in our gift shop and spend, get a tour the next? I don't know, and I don't really care. I feel fortunate that we're supported by the system of South Carolina state parks, which is 47 state parks, and we don't make money. We lose a lot of money every year just in the upkeep, but we are supported by the system of parks that supports us in the stories that we're telling and also supports us monetarily. So that I can say right now, maybe not will always be able to say that, but right now I can say that I'm not concerned if those people come back and spend money. I'm concerned that these 2,000 kids that we're educating are also helping to educate their parents who might have missed this kind of opportunity when they were growing up. I certainly didn't go on these kinds of field trips when I was growing up. So I'm trying to give that opportunity to them. All right, so now are you ready to be 3rd graders? Yeah. Okay, are you guys excited to be here today? Yeah. Oh, you didn't sound it. Okay, all right, let's see how well I can do. And as we're doing this, I am going to be referring to you guys, like I would refer to the 3rd graders, but we can also have aside adult conversations, questions, and answers, okay? We'll just be using the program as a framework for what we're doing. So, you guys all came here as a group today, right? You guys all work for Historic Columbia, right?
Right.
Okay. So that means that you all think exactly the same. You all feel exactly the same. You all give the exact same tours to your visitors, right? Right? No? No? Well, guess what? When we talk about slaves sometimes, especially in a school framework, we talk about slaves like they're one group of people. Like they all did the same thing. Like they all felt the same way. Like they all had the same exact experiences. Well, usually we have a class of about 20 to 25 kids. There were 21 house slaves that lived at Redcliffe Plantation. Now, James Henry Hammond enslaved over 300 people on all of his properties. But at Redcliffe, there were 21 house slaves there according to an 1860 census. So that's about the size of a typical class. So when they're sitting there going, no, we don't all, I have a totally different life. I think totally different. I don't think like him. I don't think like her. Well, yeah, neither did the slaves. So the first thing that we need to do as historians is to think about these people as people. Okay? They're not one group of anything. They didn't all do the same anything. Not all slaves picked cotton. Not all slaves tried to run away. Not all slaves were whipped. Not all slaves were loyal to their masters. So there's not any one truth for those people. There were 21 people, there were 21 different personalities, there were 21 different experiences. Even if they're doing the same job, I bet you and I wouldn't feel the same about the same job. We're different people, right? We come from different places, we have different experiences and backgrounds. And guess what? You might feel one way about a job today, like washing dishes might seem like a chore. The next day, you might be relieved to have your hands sticking in that water. So even your own experiences and feelings change on a daily basis. So why would we assume that slaves had this static experience? They didn't. Now, were these slaves writing down the things that they were experiencing? No. And third graders sometimes know that, and sometimes they don't. So I will usually have a mix of yes or no. I'd be like, no, it was illegal for them to learn to read or write. It was illegal for someone to teach them to learn to read or write. So these people aren't recording their daily experiences. Also, what kind of time does it take to record your thoughts and feelings? It takes a lot of time. I don't have enough free time to do that. It takes access to materials. They wouldn't have had any of those things. But does that mean that we cannot figure out what was going on a daily basis on the plantation and how these people might, and I say might, have felt about it? So we're going to use the documents of the master to help us, from a human perspective, to figure out what life would have been like, possibly, for an individual. And we're going to use names, and we're going to talk about families as we do that. And again, that comes from being just very fortunate to have the documents. So I'm going to ask you a question that's going to sound completely unrelated, and we're going to work around to how it's related. And kids love this part. This is so much fun. So I need a volunteer to tell me what you had for breakfast this morning. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Cheerios.
Cheerios. Me too. You had Cheerios too? Okay. Did you have anything on your Cheerios?
Bananas and milk.
Okay, bananas and milk. All right, I have a question for you.
Sure.
And I'll ask a question for you in a minute. You had bananas too?
No, I had blueberries.
You had blueberries. Okay. All right.
Blueberries.
So did your cow kick you this morning when you went to get the milk?
She tried to, but I kicked her back.
You kicked her back? How did that go over? Because sometimes they don't give milk after you punish them.
Cows don't mess with me.
No. Okay. All right. How about your cow? What's your cow name?
Came from the Bible.
Okay. Does Bilo have a little fenced-in area where they have cows and you can put your order in for milk and they go out and milk it for you?
They do, but on the other hand, I usually get, sometimes I get things that are not dairy related, some kinds of milk.
Oh,
Such as
okay.
soy or whatever.
Where were those things from?
They'll be on the same counter. But they can come with that.
You don't know? Okay, but you don't know the source. They came from plants, okay? And your cow's on your property?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Somebody else. Anybody else want to share what they had for breakfast this morning?
I had donuts.
Donuts. Oh, complicated. What's in your donuts?
Well, I had 6 of them. They're white.
What did you make them out of?
I didn't make them. I got them in the bag. They're Hostess.
Okay. Well, what did Hostess use to make them?
Well, I'm sure they had flour and sugar and butter and those things.
Okay.
The butter came from my cat.
Came from your cow. And I always have a third grader like this. Okay. Anybody else want to share something interesting they had? Or what you had?
Eggs.
You had eggs. Okay. I don't like to go collect eggs from chickens because I don't like to get pecked. Did you get pecked?
Yes.
You did get pecked? So you're not very good at it either, huh?
Yeah, she's got it.
Yeah, the payback is,
Okay, did anybody have sausage or bacon or, no, you had, oh, see, we gotta get sad so fast, so fast. And I get down with the kids because they're sitting on the floor. Did you cry when you had to kill your pet pig to make your sausage or bacon? You did, you cried. Was it really bloody? You had to process it too?
That's fun for you.
Right. No, that's all right. That's all right. Did anybody drive up to a little speaker and place an order for a chicken biscuit and an orange juice and then drive around the corner and hand their money out the car window and then get a bag of food? Right? So I'm being ridiculous, right? Because I go to the grocery store and buy my food, and I don't know where my food. My milk probably comes from California. I mean, even though we raise cows in South Carolina, I think our milk gets shipped from California. So we don't know where our food comes from today, but that would not have been a ridiculous question in 1859. That would not have been a ridiculous question. If you show up somewhere and you've got sausage and bacon, by God, you better be able to tell somebody where you got that sausage and bacon and what you're doing with it, right? If you have milk, you better have a cow, or you might be accused of stealing milk from your neighbor's cow. So they knew exactly where their food came from then. And their food came from the places that they lived. Now, who's taking care of the cows and the pigs and the chickens and gathering the eggs and gathering the milk? Who's growing the wheat that it would take to make your Cheerios and harvesting that and preparing that? Who's doing all that work?
The farmers.
The farmers. Who are the farmers? Who are they?
They cultivate the soil.
Who are they? But who are those people? Are they the elite class? Are they the master? Who are they?
Well, it depends on how many acres and what it's big time farming or small farming.
Okay. And let me say this, just as an aside. We're in the slave quarters at this point.
Oh, we are.
We're in the slave quarters at this point. And so they've already kind of, but I still get that answer from them. I do. Yeah. And I said, who's doing the farming? Who's doing that work?
Slaves.
But yeah, certainly for James Henry Hammond, it was the people that he enslaved that were doing that, right? Okay, so they're, they're raising that pig from a baby, feeding it every day, watering it every day, and when it comes time to slaughtering, they're the ones doing the slaughtering, they're the ones putting the meat in the smokehouse, and then who gets that food? Who gets the food? The master and his family get that food, right? Okay, so all the ham goes to the master and his family, all the eggs go to the master and the family, the milk, the eggs, everything goes to the master and his family. But wait a second, y'all are people, right? Slaves are people. And people need what to live? They need food and they need water, right? Okay, so they're eating something. What are they eating? Well, James Henry Hammond tells us that he is giving the adult slaves a ration of cornmeal. They're getting about 8 jars this size of cornmeal per person per week. Okay? We're going to talk about that. Because what do you make out of cornmeal?
corn muffins.
Okay, you can make corn muffins. What else can you make with cornmeal? Bush. Yeah. What else can you make? Anything else? Okay, cornbread. Yeah. Grits.
Has to be processed first.
Once it's made into cornmeal, you can't make it back into grits. And if you try to make it back into grits, it's mush. Right? It's mush. So they can't make grits out of it.
So specifically corn.
Cornmeal. Cornmeal was the main ration. Now who's growing the corn? Okay, and who's watering that corn if it needs water brought to it? And who's harvesting it, and then who's drying it, and who's crushing it to make this cornmeal. But then they give it all back to the master. And each week, he measures it out. And he says, you get this ration here. Okay? He calls it a ration or an allowance. You don't really take that. And then, he gives them something else. And we use this kind of, we tried using the real thing for a while, but it got too expensive and too stinky. He gives them about a pound of fatback. So he would give them a sack of fatback. they get so excited when I say, who knows what fatback is? They're all like, maybe, I love fatback. So fatback comes from a pig, okay? So I tell them to imagine a piece of bacon and imagine that very fat white part at the end. Now imagine a big block of that and a little bit of meat running through it. So he's giving them that fatback not as meat. He's giving it to them for the grease. So they can melt that fatback down and cook the mush that they've made with the water and cornmeal, because they're not getting milk to mix with that, and they're not getting eggs. So they're going to have something that approximates a cornbread or cornbread muffins, but it's all going to taste about the same. There's not very many ways you can cook that. Now, if it's summertime, so in the slave quarters, we're sitting there, there's a nice little fireplace behind us, right? And we talked about a family that lived there named Jane Bynes and her 2 children, Caroline and Davy. Is Jane going to be starting a fire in August to cook them some cornmeal? They're going to be having mush, right? They'll be having mush. Yeah, she's probably not going to start a fire. Jane's the cook at Red Cliff, so Jane is already in a hot kitchen from the time the sun comes up or earlier to past bedtime, okay? So she doesn't want to start a fire in her own house. She's done with fires for the day. Now, kids are a little bit different. And what we're going to do, I'm going to give you guys a document.
They don't get any vegetables.
Not normally. Their normal rations were cornmeal and fatback. Now, James Hammond does say that he sometimes allows them to have their own garden spots. Well, these people are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the master plantation. They're house slaves. There's not a break. When are they going to have time? Have you ever who's tended a garden before? How much time does it take to actually get something out of that garden? The planting's the easy part. So they're likely not going to have a lot to supplement that on a daily basis. Somebody's got to help me with time because I'll go for sure. All right. So I'm going to give, let's see, I'm trying to think of the best way to do this because I don't have a whole lot of copies. Let's start by doing just row. And you guys are going to be sharing in your row. And what I want you to do is I want you to look at the title and then I want you to look at the second paragraph. Kind of put it in the middle here. And you guys pass around as you can. Let's see if I run out before I get down. Yes, I'm going to run out. Can I get you to share with them? And you guys are all going to have to share. But what I want you to do is I want you to look for some food words. Food words in that second paragraph. Okay, class, 3, 2, 1, give me a 0. All right, so while you're finishing up and looking at this, we'll start with the groups that have finished, and I want to hear, just from this group right here, what's one food word that you saw here?
Vegetable.
Vegetable. How about you?
It did mention meat.
It did mention meat, okay?
It said meat.
Milk?
Okra.
Okra. Hot liquor. Hominy. Dumpling. Okay?
Donuts.
Oh, historians, give yourselves a hand. You found lots of words. Okay, I'm going to read it out loud. So I talked about that. It's hot liquor. I'm going to explain. Okay. Because the first time you say liquor, the class goes, ooh, and I explain it's not liquor. Okay, so what's the title of, yeah, I need somebody to be the teacher, because usually I'm not the bad guy. The teacher has to tell me why. What's the title of the document? Okay. So you know automatically who you're talking about here, right? Okay. So let me read this and see if you got it right. Allowance, which I said allowance and ration are 2 words that he uses interchangeably. Allowance is given out daily to the children at the rates for each child of 1/3 of meal and meat given to work hands. Okay? So work hands are the adults that are working. They're getting 1/3 of the cornmeal and the meat, meaning the fat back.
Oh, meat.
Right. Yeah. An abundant supply of vegetables should be always at hand in a garden cultivated for the special purpose, to be cooked with their meat. Each child must have daily at least 1 pint of skimmed milk. Their food should be cooked by the nurse and consist for breakfast and supper of hominy and milk and cold cornbread. Their dinner of vegetable soup, usually pot liquor, and that's when they go, so we're not talking about alcohol here. Pot liquor is kind of the juices left behind after you've cooked something, after you've simmered something, okay? So after you've simmered vegetables, that's the juice that's left. So pot liquor or okra soup and dumplings or bread, cold bread or, and then it continues on another page that you don't have. So are the adults getting more or less than the kids?
More.
Are the adults getting more or less? The adults are getting less. The adults are getting less. The kids are getting a much bigger variety. So I'm going to ask you, and you'll probably have an answer like this. Sometimes it takes the kids a little bit longer to get to this. But why do you think James Henry Hammond would be feeding, well, okay, sorry, I'm going to backtrack on myself. Who is the author of this document? Who's the author? James Henry Hammond, right. Who is the audience? Who is he expecting to read this? Overseers. And the kids usually say the children. And so then we have to go back, are the children reading this? And then they're like, no, it's the nurse that's reading it. Is the nurse reading this? You know, the nurse is an enslaved person. But yeah, he's writing this for an overseer. Or his sons, who he expects to kind of take over the plantations. James Henry Hammond really fancied himself kind of the model of how a plantation should be run. And he wrote a plantation manual. And he wrote not only about what the kids ate, but where the people slept, what kind of work they did, what their holidays would be, how they would clean up, what the duties of each individual person were. Talks about women who are nursing, what kind of time they get. He wrote a whole document, okay? And this is one of the documents in there. So it's important when you're looking at a historic document to know who the author is and who the audience is, and who it's affecting, because those are all three different people with three different perspectives. So now let's get back to the document. Why is he feeding children more and a better variety than he's feeding adults?
They're growing.
They're growing. That's exactly right. And the chaperones always snicker at this because I'm like, I'm not getting any taller. My bones aren't getting any longer. I'm not growing anymore. And they're all like, yeah, we gain weight, every year. We're getting bigger and bigger. But yeah, ideally the adults aren't growing anymore, but the kids are. Those kids that I see won't be wearing the same clothes next year that they're wearing this year, okay? And Hammond knows that. Hammond also has list after list after list after list of children who have died in infancy and when they're toddlers at his plantations. So early on in his plantation management, he writes this like around 1858, but in the 1830s when he gets his start, there are kids dying all over the place, okay? And so through experimenting with providing more and better food, he realizes that he can get these kids to make it through to adulthood. Why does he care if they survive to adulthood? Yeah. They're going to grow up to be the adult slaves who are doing the majority of the work. And sometimes we get to this with kids, depending on the class, the adults are going to be having children. And if an adult has a child, that child is also going to be a slave, and then Hammond doesn't have to purchase another person. His people are creating more people, okay? So even with third grade, we kind of get to that concept. All right, good job, historians. Now pass your papers back up to the front. Now, there was one time of year that was considered special on the plantation. if James Henry Hammond allowed it. In that plantation manual, he talks about holidays or holy days, okay? So if Hammond felt like it had been a good year, that he had made a lot of money off his crops, that his slaves had done what he wanted them to do, then he would grant a holiday between Christmas Day and New Year's Day. If he didn't feel like he had made enough money, typically he blamed it on the Negroes being lazy, direct quote from his journals, and he would say Christmas canceled. Could he do that? And sometimes they're like, no, he can't do that. He can't keep Santa from coming. Yes, he can. On his plantation, he owns the plantation. He owns those people. He dictates everything that's going on the plantation. So more years than holidays, he would say, no holiday, it's canceled, okay? So the slaves never knew if they were going to have this holiday or not. But if he granted it, there were two things that he typically talks about giving: extra allowances or extra rations. So food. So you guys are going to get to examine those foods, examples of those foods, and try to figure out what they are. So we just did kind of a group activity. This is going to be a silent activity because I don't want you to ruin it for the ones in the back who haven't gotten it yet, okay? But we are going to look at some food items. And you can look at these, you can feel them, you can smell them, you cannot taste them because there have been lots of hands. So we'll start this one here. So look at it, smell it, feel it, pass it on, and then I'll come right here and get you. I'm just going to kind of do this randomly. And then we'll make sure everybody has a chance to see it before we talk about it. But look at it, smell it, feel it, pass it on. A lot of time. When I first started there, we were not sending school groups like this. You know, we had a field trip every now and then kind of thing. But I would say, and our program has evolved. I mean, it's gotten more in depth. We've pulled in new documents. We've challenged the kids more. And so I would say we've been doing this program for a good solid 6 years. Yes. But we have been doing a program like this for at least the last 4 years. Yeah. So does anybody know what this is?
Tornado sugar?
Well, I don't know what that is. Yeah, it's raw sugar. Yeah, it's raw sugar. Okay, thank you. You taught me something. And how many of you knew that sugar came from a plant? And I'll get mixed answers there. And sugar comes from lots of different kinds of plants. But in this case, on his plantations, James Henry Hammond was having his slaves grow sugar cane. And same with the cornmeal. You know, they're planting that sugar cane, they're harvesting that sugar cane, they're processing that sugar cane, and they're giving it all back to him. And if he feels like it's been a good year and he's in a good mood, then he might ration some of that out to you as a slave. Okay? All right, we've got another one. Dusty, if you want to stand first, I'll get you guys back here. Thank you. Okay, look at it, smell it, feel it, do not eat it.
What would happen after things about people who are cooking in the kitchen
What would happen?
if I decide I want to taste that, I want to eat something? Do they get punished because of that?
Did they get caught?
Yeah,
If they get caught, yeah. So we talk a lot about Jane Bynes, who's the cook, and so we talk about her family out in the slave quarters, but then we also continue that thread into the mansion. And in the mansion, and, you know, it doesn't matter where I start. If I start in the house, they hear something, and then I tie it into the slave quarters. But I typically start in the slave quarters and end up going to the house last. And we talk about Jane, what Jane would have been cooking for the Hammond family, what he had access to. And, you know, I just let them kind of free answer for a little while, because anything they say is acceptable. He could have had access to anything, to any kind of meat to any kind of vegetable. His garden list is this long of what he's having his slaves cook for him: watermelon, corn, carrots, tomatoes. He had 5 different types of cabbage. So this man had access to any food. Sugar, he has access to sugar on a daily basis. He has access to this thing that you're looking at right now on a daily basis. So Jane can cook anything for the Hammond family, right? Does Jane get to take those things home to her family when she goes back to the slave quarters?
No.
Probably not. Probably not. Now Hammond doesn't explicitly say that she's not allowed to do that, but stealing food is on his list of punishments. So yeah, if she's doing it, it's probably something that he doesn't know. Would she risk doing that? I don't know. I don't know her personality, so I don't know. The things that one person would risk, another might not. I have kids, after we've done the program, will say, they'll make I'll ask them for observations, and they'll say, well, I would just run away. And I say, would you? Would you? Well, think about me. I'm a woman who has 4 children, and my youngest child is 2. And she is noisy. How am I going to sneak away with a 2-year-old? And what's the punishment going to be if we get caught?
What are you gonna live on?
So am I going to risk that? And yeah, where am I going to go? What am I going to live on? Even if you think you could survive on your own, how are you going to feed 4 kids on the road? So would you? I don't know if you would or not. That's a lot of that is personality. Are you the kind of person that would take that risk? Sometimes I'll have kids say, well, could the kids share with their parents? And it's so sweet. It's like, yeah, they might have. They might have done that, yeah. But when Jane, what does it smell like? What does a person smell like who's been in a kitchen all day cooking? What does that person smell like? They smell like the food. They probably smell a little sweaty, but everybody smells sweaty. So, they smell like the food. And if Jane's been baking a cake for a celebration for the Hammond family, she goes home smelling like cake. And if you're Caroline and Davy, and you've had what Hammond listed, you've had some vegetables, you've had some milk, you've had pretty bland meals. How are you going to feel when your mom comes home and you're asking her what she cooked for the Hammond family? Or you can smell what she cooked for the Hammond family. How would you feel? And then they just start raising their hands and they say, I would feel mad. I would feel upset. I would feel hungry. I would feel jealous. And they don't usually say this one, but after they kind of gone around and answered a little bit, I'll say, how about confused? I mean, if you're a child and somebody is getting something that you're not allowed to get, would you not be a little confused? Like, that doesn't make sense to you. So yeah, we tie those things throughout the program. All right, have we had this go all the way around? Okay, we'll go through this part real quickly. Somebody, one answer, what do these pieces smell like, if anything? Wheat or barley, okay, that earthy smell, yeah. What did they feel like? They felt like peanuts or peas, okay? If you take a peanut and you hold it between your fingers, can you crush it? Probably. This is hard. Harder, yeah, no. And then I also say to them, do you think I'd be passing around peanuts right now? How many people have a peanut allergy? No, and what do you think it is? No? It's a bean. It's in the bean family. What kind of bean is it? No?
Soybean?
No? What if I told you that in order to consume this, you would roast it over a fire until it's brown or black and gets aromatic, and then you would crush that and add water to So, pulling it back to where we started, Hammond is giving this extra allowance. Sometimes at Christmas, he's giving coffee and sugar to people who have had a very basic, bland diet, if not sparse. the entire year. They're eating the same thing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for every meal. Okay? Yes?
How did they get salt? Don't you have to have salt?
How do they get
Apply
salt?
it,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. The fat pack would be salted. The fat pack would be salted to preserve it. So I guess that's your answer right there. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't specifically address salt in their diet, but yeah, that fat pack's going to be salted. So I want you to think about this before I have you answer. If that is something that you're getting maybe one time a year, and you may have 5 days to go visit. Sometimes he would give passes for them to go visit other plantations, to go into town. Would you have a big party and use all that at one time? Or would you save it and use it to supplement your food all year long? How many of you would save it and use it all year long? Raise your hands high. Okay. All right, put your hands down. How many of you would use it all at once? Okay. All right. I want you guys to come stand up here with me. Okay. All right. Stand with me. Okay. So we're going to see if they made a good decision or not. Okay. So imagine now we're in the slave quarters. Okay. We're in the slave quarters. You have used all your food, right? You've used all your extra rations. You guys have saved it. Okay. You get this in December, and you've used it in December. April rolls around, and James Henry Hammond has already had his slaves put in some of his crops, but it's been a really, really, really wet spring, and he is afraid that he is not going to be quite as successful this year as he had been last year. And he's got to find a way to compensate for that a little bit, and he decides to sell you. Oh! Yep. Can you take your extra rations with you? No. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Can you take your extra rations with you? You're lucky if you get to take the clothes that are on your body when he takes you to sell you, okay? Because he owns everything you have, okay? So how are you feeling about your decision?
It's worse.
Okay, all right. All right, yeah, we'll get to that because mine was too. But I know what your rationale is. Go ahead and tell us what your rationale.
I wouldn't want to have to think about it the whole year.
Oh, okay, different than mine.
I just do it at one time.
I have no self-control.
Well, I don't have.
So when my brother and I would get candy bars, I would eat mine all at once, and my brother would be like, next day, hey, I'm gonna have a piece of my candy. And I'd be like, yeah, you just take it. Yes, but I have no self-control, so I would eat it all at one time. Yes. Okay. So another scenario: do you think, even though you can't see it because you're not really in it, but do you think that the slave quarters that they're in is secure? Do you think that mice or bugs can get into that slave quarters?
Yes, probably.
Yes, they can. It's not very secure. So if a mouse gets into your sugar and eats half of it and poops in the other half, how do y'all feel about your decision? How do you feel about it? Where's your sugar? Where's your sugar?
Well, I just figured that if I'm living a life that's so monotonous, I would like for myself and my family members to at least have some semblance of celebration.
Okay. All right. But a mouse can't get to yours, right?
Yeah, it's also in my stomach.
That's right.
That's another thing. But I like sugar.
If February rolls around and James Henry Hammond is unhappy with you, he says you've been lazy and you have not been pulling your share, right? Can he send an overseer in your house to punish you? Yeah, because he owns you and he owns that house. And often the kids are real quick to jump to people getting beat or getting whipped, but the biggest form of punishment that Mr. Hammond likes is to take away food. Is to take away rations, to take away clothing, to take away food. Are they going to flip your house until they find that food? Yes. And they're going to take it from you. And not only are they going to take it from you, but you might get accused of stealing it, because yes, we gave you that back in December, so this can't be what we gave you in December, okay? So, how do you think y'all feel about your decision now? Pretty good? Now, how many of you would change your decision based on those scenarios? Okay? And you know what? Some of you might. Some of you might take that risk. And I bet that there was a slave who saved their rations and had one of those things happen to it. And the next year they said, if I get those things, by God, I am eating it all before something happened to it. Or somebody used it all at once and saw one of their friends got away with saving it for the whole year, and they said, you know what, I'm going to try that next year. Right? Because these are people that make decisions based on their experiences. They don't all do the same thing. They don't all think the same way. And they all have different experiences. Okay? Thank you. Thank you, guys. So, we just took one document and we spent a half an hour or more just kind of teasing out that one document. So then, you know, after we do that activity, I tell them, in all fairness, I don't know exactly what those people did with their extra rations because they are not writing down the things that they did. And we kind of reiterate that reading and writing portion. But that doesn't mean that we can't think as humans what we might do. And until we start to think that way, if we just go around saying, we have no idea what the slaves were feeling, what they were, you know, we know what the master wanted and we know what the master gave, but we don't know how the slaves responded to that. We may not know one individual's way of responding to it, but we can think about multiple ways that as humans, we might respond to that. So we've got to think about these people and as individuals with individual motivations. And motivations that change from day to day based on their experiences. So the last thing I want to do, because I want to save a little bit of time for some questions. We're going to take one more document. Actually, we'll take a couple. No, I'll take one. Okay. I've got a few more of these than I have the other one. I'll give this to you. And what I want you to do, I want you can look at the whole thing, but there's only one line that I really want you to focus on. I want you to go all the way to the bottom and the line next to the last line. Okay? So not the final line, but the one right above that. Take a look at that one. See if you can figure out what it says. Thank you, ma'am. First of all, what do you think this document is? What is this? It's a work list. It's a task list. So we talk about what the word task means, because that's not a word that they use a lot. What is the first word in that line? Water. The second word is not one that they're typically familiar with.
We're not familiar with it.
No? Anybody have a guess? Toters. Water toters. And to tote is to carry. Okay? And then there's two names out beside that. Cato and Easter. Cato and Easter. And we know from another document that at the time this was written, that Cato is about 12 years old, it's a little boy, and that Easter is about 8 years old, it's a little girl. Okay? Easter is a name. Mm-hmm. Yes, and that goes into a whole other program on African naming practices. Using holidays, days of the week. So Easter is a little girl about 8. So most of the kids that we're talking to about this are somewhere in between that, between 8 and 12, usually around 9 or 10. Okay? And their job would have been to carry water. So then we kind of go through what they would have used water for on a plantation.
Make rain.
Make rain. What were they using water for on a plantation? To drink, to cook, yeah, bathing, washing clothes, irrigating plants, watering animals, washing clothes, washing yourself, yeah, all those things. And there are 7 Hammond family members living there in the 1860 census, and there are 21 house slaves to take care of the needs of those 7 people. And the water toters are children, because it doesn't take a lot of skill to carry water, and it's pretty simple. The instructions are pretty simple. So Hammond has children as water toters. Then I show them this. Now, So I'm gonna let you take a look at this. This is post-emancipation. So this little boy is not enslaved. This is a little boy named Buren, and he's about 10 years old. And in this photograph, take a look, right in this corner of this photograph is the slave quarters that those kids are sitting in during that program.
These are pretty incredible documentation. Typical of the plantation. I mean, that's all they did all day long.
That's why I said we're totally spoiled.
Yeah.
We're totally spoiled.
Crazy.
So this little boy named Buren is about the age of the kids that we're seeing. And what has Buren got on top of his head? He's got a bucket. He's toting water. So we give this to them just, even though this is not an enslaved person and we tell them it's not, this child is doing the same job that children his age were doing as enslaved, and they're wearing he's wearing very similar clothing to what those children would have been wearing. And that's going to be his job probably all day long. He's going to be carrying water.
Until he gets to be how old, though?
Hmm?
Until he gets to be how old?
Good question. Good question. Probably about the time he is 14, 15. He's going to start to do more skilled labor, or it's going to be determined if he's going out into the field, or he's going to be working in the house. Yeah. And this is another thing that we tie into the house when we're talking about the Hammond family's children. So up until these kids are about 5 or 6 years old, all of these kids are playing together, and they're all being taken care of by a slave nurse, as Hammond called her. They're having their meals together, they're playing games together, the white and black children. But when they get to be about 5 or 6, you start to see divisions happening on the plantation. You start to see the slave children doing the jobs of their parents or the other adults that they're living with and learning their work. You start to see the kids inside the house getting their education. And even within the Hammond family's home, there are divisions as to what that education is going to be between his daughters and his sons. Yeah?
I took many third graders on field trips to historic Brattonville.
Yes?
And Miss Kitty
Yeah?
is absolutely incredible. You know, it explained to the children that as they played together, they became friends.
Oh, absolutely.
And the children of the family would secretly teach some of the enslaved children to read and
Sure,
write.
and that could happen. That could happen. We don't have any specific incidences of that happening on at Red Cliff and on Hammond's plantation, but it certainly could happen. But again, that's a huge risk. It's a risk for the person that's teaching and the person that's learning. Yeah.
Do you live on property?
I do. So after they've taken a look at this and we talk about, you know, what kind of jobs those kids their age would be doing, and then inside the house talking about what their daily life would have been like, learning music, learning to read and write, learning to manage the plantation, learning math and science if they're boys. So we do different activities inside the house to kind of illustrate that, but always tying it back to the slave quarters. In the slave quarters, I let them try some water buckets that are reproductions of the time period. So, let's see what time it is. One more thing I want to show you. We have, this is not for the 3rd grade program, but in the 4th grade program, we've started to talk, because they're a little bit older, right? So we started to talk about kids their age, and kids their age could already be picking cotton. There's a little boy named Little Tom. He's the youngest on this list, who's 9 years old. And Tom is picking 95 pounds of cotton in one day. The oldest is a 13-year-old boy named Limbrick, and he is picking 72 pounds of cotton in a day. There's a little girl on here, Elizabeth, 11, 80 pounds of cotton. Little Rose, 12 years old, is picking 102 pounds of cotton in a day, okay? So we have a volunteer who likes to sew, and we researched a cotton bag, and they would put this over their shoulder. Look how long, I mean, I wouldn't think, you know, before we did the research, I wouldn't think that a bag would be this big, but if you're picking 100 pounds of cotton, you're going to have a big bag to put it in. And this would drag along behind them, and they would be stooping and picking, and drag along behind them, stooping and picking. Yeah, he had rules for pregnant women, how often they were allowed to work, and when they were paid to take breaks, that kind of thing. And breastfeeding women, he has specific rules for this. He has rules for everybody. Yeah. Anyway, so we have these experiential things for them to do, and we say before they do it, we're doing this as a fun activity, and you're doing this for a few minutes. But I want you to think about if you are that 9-year-old, if you are Eastern, if you're Cato, if you're Buren, what it would feel like to do this job all day long. Most third graders don't go home with sore backs and sore shoulders. But they are doing this job all day long. What are their bodies going to feel like? By the time they're 30, what are their bodies going to feel like?
Probably a lot of them die, prove that you do this.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yep, malnutrition and just hard labor. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to try these once we kind of break up. But we've got a few minutes, and I want you to be able to ask me questions or challenge me in some way, and we'll get a conversation going. And again, I know these are not documents from your sites, but somebody was saying that in one of the previous speakers was talking about a slave ship list of slaves that were brought over. Is that correct? Somebody said earlier today? Okay. Well, we talk about that with kids too in an outreach program. So when I go to third grade classes sometimes, I have them all sit on the carpet, and I have them all get down and sit together they're on their bottoms, and they're sitting, and they'll sit close, and I'll be like, all right, scoot in more, scoot in more, scoot in more. And then I'm like, all right, just sit there for just a minute, and I'll act like I'm doing something, preparing something, and I'll just make them sit. And when they start to you have to be absolutely silent. Okay, be absolutely silent. And then after they've done that for a little while, we start talking about how uncomfortable that is. Does anybody, as soon as you start sitting together, who had to use the bathroom, and want to raise their hand, or how do you like your shoulder rubbing up against this person's shoulder? How would you like it if you had to sleep like that? And we start talking about the physicality of being on a slave ship and how long you would have to be in that position and the things you would have to do in that position and the things that the people on either side of you are doing. People are dying. You're going to have to take a trip with a dead person the whole way, And so we talk about those things. So we use documents like that to make experiences for those people. And I would argue you could do that with adults on a tour because that would impact an adult a lot. If you made them stand next to somebody, at least with the class, they know each other, But if you have a group of adults on a tour, they don't know each other. They're going to be pretty reluctant to do that. And I find that sometimes our knowledge comes out of being uncomfortable. So.
Do you show them pictures of the slave ships where they're flying up like that?
We have not. We have a copy of that. Yeah, one of the original prints of that, or copies of that. I show the kids that when I take it to the school. I do. Right now we have it on display for a program that we were doing, but I wish we'd used it more often. But no, we'll take that, and at first they don't know what they're looking at. And we'll go and point out the people in that illustration, the Brooks slave ship. Yeah, that really can help you.
Do you have any way of knowing if this is a typical plantation? I mean, these people were individuals and had their own program, so they had plantation owners. They were
Absolutely.
individuals also.
Absolutely. I don't try to lump or split, I know specifically about the man that owned our plantation. But using the laws of the time and the general accepted practices of the time, there's nothing that I've read in his work that is unusual. So that's how I would answer that. because I wouldn't compare him to somebody else because, yeah, day to day is going to be different. And, you know, these men are writing these things isn't going exactly like they've written. You know, probably not. Hammond talks about firing overseers like he's changing underwear. You know, he gets sick of somebody in a week's time and hires somebody else. So certainly things are not going exactly like he planned in his manual. So I can't even compare him to himself.
Well, you hear a lot about the cruelty, you know, how cruel some overseers and that were.
Right.
And then on the other hand, like some of the slave narratives that were written in the Depression, WPA, you know, and that interview, a lot of those had very long memories of,
And that's
you know.
good Lord, that's a whole
But
other
they
subject.
were
you
a
know.
lot older.
They were, and there were motivations for them to say positive things still. I mean, what a horrible era that they were being interviewed in, and one would argue more violent than the times that people were enslaved. So, yeah, that's a whole issue. But, you know, I used to get this really common question of, was he a good slave owner? Was he, and I will be honest with you, I'm surprised I haven't gotten fired yet, because I'll say that's white guilt, wanting to know if he was a good slave owner. You know, let's look at the institution of slavery, and we can all agree that the institution of slavery was abhorrent, right? We look at the people who were house slaves at Red Cliff have been either purchased for their skill, or they have been picked from the larger field slave population because of a skill that has been recognized or because of the way they look. As a woman, knowing Hammond's records and his journals, I don't want to be chosen for the way that I look. I would rather be out in the field working all day long, every day, hard labor, than to be chosen to go to his plantation because of the way that I look, because he sexually assaulted many of his slaves. House slaves had longer days. They worked 24/7. Those holidays that field slaves may have gotten, at Christmas time, guess what? They're entertaining. So those house slaves don't get that time. They're under the constant eye of the master of the plantation, in very close proximity. It's in their face every day who they are and who they work for. And there's less of that in a field setting. And I'm not trying to make the argument that one was better than another. It's perspective, I guess. You know, I wouldn't have wanted to be Jane Vines in 4 layers of clothes inside a kitchen in August, cooking breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the Hammond family, inhaling smoke and feeling the heat. So it is. And I think the more that we kind of talk about those specific things and what that would have felt like, I think that's so much more important than, no, he was not a good slave owner.
We're kind of working right now with the Library of Congress because this is from the Library of Congress.
So just like Joe Schmo, we paid $1,400 to get this digitized, this 29-page document digitized by the Library of Congress. No, they had to pull out their special camera and their special curator. Yeah, and what I have been disappointed in is that this is not up on their website as a resource yet, when we know it's digitized. So if someone asks for a copy of that, we'll provide it digitally. So when Hammond gets his first plantation in 1831 by marrying into a family that had that plantation, it was his wife's dowry, he remarks that they were going on the task system. And so that they would have some piddly little task and they would get it done and then they would waste the whole day away, just playing and doing nothing. And that he thought that was ineffective and he was going to switch to the gang system immediately. So they worked in gangs of people and they were working from sun up until sundown. So yeah, there were lots of different ways that people managed other people's labor. So Hammond has a list of drivers. And a driver is not a carriage driver. A driver would be usually a young male slave who would be overseeing that gang and driving them to do do whatever task is assigned to them, or whatever job is assigned to them.
And that's the other thing about Silver Bluff Plantation, which was the original plantation that his wife's dowry was, is when he gets there, the Fitzsimmons family lived in Charleston. So they weren't getting up to Silver Bluff very often. There were overseers there, but those people had been, and I'm getting ready to use some air quotes, they had lived in relative freedom. I mean, where were they gonna, they couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't leave. But they didn't have a master on that plantation kind of watching, micromanaging everything they did. When Hammond got there, that was his sole purpose. So these people, these 147 people that he inherited, went from relative freedom to having this man having a court of divorce and marriage at Christmas time, where he would say, if you two were married and there had been no children from your union, guess what? I think we're going to try you with him, and we're going to try you with her, and we'll see how that works out. Or the two of you were bickering and just causing disharmony. Well, I don't think that's going to work. I think now we're going to set you up house with her, and you're going to have to go. But yeah, he was micromanaging their daily existence, and we see it in his written record that he is obsessed. That's a good word, obsessive about this. Yeah.
I mean, most people didn't own 14,000 acres and over 300 slaves. But I can tell you this, something like 95% of the black people that were living in South Carolina were slaves. So we do know that. We may be talking about the top 5% of white people, but we're talking about 95%, if not more, of the black people in South Carolina. And as far as during a program, we had a lady come up to us afterwards and she said, why are you calling these people African Americans? Because most of them were born in Africa, so they weren't Africans by this point in this history. And they certainly weren't Americans. And great point. Fabulous point. Yeah. We use the term black. We'll use the term Negro as a historical term. And we use African Americans, so we kind of use all three. But I am more likely to use the word black. Like when we're talking to and you'll see the teachers kind of like, look away when I say it because they're afraid that I've said something wrong. But when we're talking to these kids about, who was allowed to be a senator, James Henry Hammond was a senator. Well, the Senate didn't look like their classroom at that time. Black people were not allowed to be part of the United States government. And the teachers were like, did she just say black? Shouldn't she be saying African American? But, we listen to feedback. I mean, when that lady came up to me and said that, it changed my way of thinking of the term African American. Like, she's spot on. There's nothing about that description that is accurate for these people. And in the census record in 1860, the census that they were using in our area, instead of saying race, because if it said race, it would be an N for Negro. Instead of saying race, it says color, and it's B's. It's all B's for black. So we do have the historic documentation to use the term black. But language matters, and listening to people and what terminology they want to hear matters.
And colored was a term.
Color was later. Color was later.
Well, it was used as, I know, for in the Civil War, troops.
Colored troops.
Colored troops.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was an official term.
Yeah. Great discussions.
Political correctness.
Maybe a politically correct.
No. I'm just wavering the discussion as political correctness.
But and see, I disagree with that because I do think that people sometimes accuse you of doing that when you're trying to get the terminology right. I think it is being sensitive to the people that are in your group because not everybody wants to use that same term, and that's kind of why we interchange things. Like even in the same discussion of the same program, we'll use African Americans, Black, Negro, all in the same discussion because you don't know what words are triggers for people. Just because that word's not a trigger for you doesn't mean that's not an emotional trigger for her. So it's more about sensitivity and inclusiveness than it is about politically correct. I mean, I'm telling you, I should have gotten fired many, many, many times for the things that I've said.
And I think for enslaved people, it's a more accurate terminology, it's a more accurate description
Absolutely.
of what they were doing.
Right, how do you identify yourself? I'm a woman,
Yeah.
first, you know, I'm a park ranger, too, but that's only part of me. And, you know, it's the biggest part of my time, but that's not how I would define myself, you know? And first, you would define yourself by your name. I'm Joy.
Thank you, Joy.
Oh.